The voice on the phone was shaking, cracked like old vinyl. "I have something, you need to hear it." That's how it started. No name. No introduction. Just that. The kind of sentence that empties your lungs before you answer. It was 2:17 a.m. I hadn't slept in days, but my mind jolted like a bullet ripping past the ear. The caller breathed like had outrun something that wasn't human. They're real tapes, CIA tapes. Blackmail on senators, governors. They're watching children and someone's recording it. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. He knew I was listening. Every second of silence was a rope pulling him deeper. He said, "They're on VHS, original stock, not copies, not leaked. I got them from a man who shouldn't exist anymore." He chuckled without joy. "I paid for them with my future." He told me where to meet him, then paused. "If I don't show, I burned." The line went dead. No click. Just breath, then nothing. I stared at the receiver like it had just confessed to murder. That call was a crack in something much older than me. I hadn't seen the tapes. I hadn't heard what was on them. But I knew already, I'd never be clean again. He sat in the dark for 17 minutes after the call ended. Not frozen, just waiting. The silence after that voice wasn't empty. It was dense. Pressing. As if every second dared him to forget what he heard. He didn't write anything down. He didn't replay it in his head. He just listened to the hum of the fridge, the clock ticking, the slow whine of guilt settling in his chest like a fever. There was no one to call. No one he could trust. And yet, the fear didn't come from the threat. It came from knowing he would follow it. Some part of him had already stood up. Already left. Already opened the door. And by the time he did, it wasn't a decision. It was gravity. A pull towards something he didn't understand but couldn't ignore. He didn't know the man. Didn't know the tapes. But he knew what people did to keep power. He'd seen it before. Smelled it. He slipped on his coat, grabbed the recorder, and left the light on behind him. A hallway light flickered as he passed. Something deep inside him whispered, "You want come back clean." He didn't go straight to the address. Not yet. First, he needed to know who he was walking toward. He pulled an old box of files from his closet. Things he swore never to touch again. Names. Incidents. Patterns. All connected by one thing. Silence. Every page he flipped was a breath he didn't want to take. He found a name buried deep. Julian Marek. Ex-operative. Disavowed. Allegedly dead. But no body, no obituary. Just a classified expulsion and a quiet burial in the agency's records. Marek was black operations. He handled what others couldn't see. Rumors tied him to Project Eden, a surveillance initiative no one officially admitted existed. What would he be doing selling tapes? And why now? Every possible answer made his hands shake. This wasn't about exposing secrets. It was about surviving the fallout of someone else's sins. And if Marek was alive, someone else would want him dead. The motel was silent when he arrived, too silent. No cars. No voices. Just the creak of old wind pressing against aluminum siding. Room 108. He parked 2 lots away. Walked the rest. Shadows clung to every step like wet cloth. He reached the door and found it ajar. Not wide. Just enough. He drew a breath and pushed it open. The air inside was wrong. Humid. Still, sharp with the scent of plastic and decay. The curtains were drawn. The TV buzzed blue. Marek sat on the edge of the bed, his back to the door. Still as a corpse. "You came," he said without turning. "Good. I don't have much time." His voice was thinner now. Dry, distant. Like it had been buried and dug up again. "They know I have them. They'll come. Not for the tapes, for you. Because you listened." He placed the duffel bag on the bed without looking at him. Marek's hands trembled as he unzipped it. Inside, stacked and silent, were the tapes. Dozens. All numbered. Some labeled in sharp red ink. Merrick whispered, "I thought I could forget." He lifted one. "But memory doesn't care what we want." He held it like it was radioactive. "This one. Start here. You'll know why." His eyes never left the screen, though it was only static now. "It's not the acts they're hiding," he said. "It's how normal they look doing it." A moment passed. "You'll wish you hadn't seen." Then with a strange calm he added, "They'll come for me. You'll hear about it. Just don't come back." And he turned the volume up. Static filled the room like ocean surf, drowning the last of the silence. He didn't sleep. Didn't even sit. He just stood in the middle of his apartment, one foot shifting, one hand holding the tape like a weapon. The silence pressed in, loud and alive. He didn't play the tape. Not yet. He needed to feel what it meant before he could see it. The kind of weight that warps time. He remembered his sister, 15, gone without explanation. They'd said, ran away, but the way the words tasted then still lingered like rot. No answers. No trail. Just silence. He'd chased that silence his whole life. Merrick's voice echoed in his mind. "It's not what they did. It's how normal they looked doing it." Was this what happened to her? Was this what they'd buried? His hands trembled, not from fear, from recognition. He'd seen enough lies to know what truth felt like. It felt like a bruise under the skin. It felt like this. So he stood still, heart like thunder in his ribs, waiting for the courage to press play, or the mercy to burn it all. He placed the tape into the player slowly, like setting a loaded gun on a table. The TV flickered. Static. Then a flicker of an office, bland walls, tan carpet, a potted plant wilting in the corner. A man entered frame. Senator Howard Wexler. Smiling. He wasn't doing anything yet. Just sitting. Adjusting his tie. Sipping water. That was the horror. Not violence. Not blood. Just ease. Calm. Then chill. A predator in daylight. The tape cut, then resumed. A child entered. Barely 12. Face blurred. Voice muted. But the way the senator leaned forward, the smile that never reached his eyes. That was enough. The protagonist slammed the stop button. The silence after felt like it screamed. He leaned against the wall, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't politics. This was pathology. And someone filmed it like a family picnic. The tape still whirred in the player, waiting, as if daring him to finish it. He stumbled to the sink and splashed water on his face, but it didn't wash anything away. The image was burned in. That calm face. That damn tie. He kept hearing the silence. Not a scream. Not a cry. Just compliance. Like the child had already learned that no one was coming. He stared into the mirror. His reflection looked back like a stranger. Unshaven. Pale doll. Eyes hollowed. He thought of the man he used to be, a reporter, hungry for truth. But this wasn't a story. This was a graveyard. He whispered her name under his breath. Lena. As if saying it now would protect her from the past. But maybe she was never lost. Maybe she was hidden. Buried behind a screen, catalogued, archived, forgotten on purpose. He punched the mirror once. Glass cracked like bone. He didn't feel the blood. Only the heat of rage he'd tried to bury. He didn't turn off the TV. It still buzzed in the background as he pulled out his notebook. This wasn't about breaking the story. It was about knowing what had been taken. Not just from him, from dozens, maybe hundreds. Merrick had said the tapes were original, which meant they were organized, catalogued. The kind of archive that only existed with permission from above. This wasn't one predator. This was a system. A network of people who watched, filmed, and traded horror as currency. He wrote the name, Wexler, in red ink. Beneath it Merrick, and a question mark Tati. He circled both. then paused. Why now? Why would Merrick sell these? Regret? Revenge? Or something else? He needed answers. And he knew only one person alive might still be able to give them. A woman named Kessler. Ex-analyst. Off-grid. Untraceable, unless you knew where to look. He drove through the outskirts of the city before the sun rose, roads still wet from the night's rain. Kessler lived where GPS died. A cabin buried deep past broken roads and fallen trees. No power lines. No cell signal. Just silence and pine. They'd worked together once years ago. She vanished after testifying in closed court about classified data structures. People said she lost her mind. He knew better. She'd seen too much and chosen exile. As he approached the cabin, he slowed. No movement. No sound. But the chimney was smoking. Someone was home. He got out slowly, hands visible. No sudden moves. He knew better. The door creaked open before he knocked. A woman stood in the shadows, early 40s, lean, eyes sharp like glass. You brought something, she said, voice calm. He nodded. And they'll kill me for it, he replied. She stepped aside. Then come inside, and die warm. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with smoke and silence. Kessler hadn't aged the way most did, she had sharpened. Her eyes darted like a predator constantly calculating distance. You shouldn't have brought that here, she said, not looking at him. He placed the tape on the table gently, like an offering. They're original, he said. Merrick gave them to me. That name cracked something in her mask. Her hands twitched, but she stayed still. Then you're already marked, she replied. He asked what she remembered. Eden Protocol. Blackmail through surveillance. They monitored vulnerabilities. Sexual preferences. Addictions. Children were never supposed to be part of it. But they always were. Her voice shook, but only once. She lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. Merrick had access to the vault. If these are real, then he's dead already, and you're next. The tape sat between them like a ticking bomb. And both of them knew it had already exploded. She brought out an old briefcase and popped it open on the table. Inside were photos, faded documents, and one small drive. I kept a backup, names, patterns, a few locations. Not enough to burn them, but enough to point the fire, she said. He picked up a photo, grainy black and white. Wexler shaking hands with an unnamed general. Background, an empty school playground. Kessler leaned over him. This isn't about politics, she whispered. It's leverage, control. They use children because it keeps everyone silent. He asked who ran it. She hesitated, then said, You'll think I'm insane. But I think it's not just the agency. I think it's private now, contracted, fragmented. He felt the room spin. If it was privatized, it couldn't be traced. Couldn't be stopped. Why would Merrick leak this? He asked. Because he wanted someone else to die with him, she said coldly. He never planned on surviving, but maybe, he thought you could. A sudden bang on the door cut through them like a blade. They froze. Kessler drew a pistol from her belt without hesitation. No one should have followed you, she hissed. He moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. A black SUV, idled just beyond the trees, engine humming like a threat. Kessler moved fast, pulling open floorboards beneath the rug. Go, she said. Back tunnel. It leads to the creek. Stay low. He grabbed the drive and the tape, hesitated. Come with me, he urged. But she shook her head. I bought time with isolation. You burn it if they catch me. Promise me. Before he could answer, the window shattered. Gunfire erupted. She shoved him down the tunnel. The hatch slammed, shut behind him. In the dark, crawling through dirt and roots, he whispered to himself, I didn't come here to run. But already, everything was on fire. The tunnel led him out to the creek behind the cabin, narrow, cold, fast-moving. He emerged into the gray light of late afternoon, soaked in sweat and guilt. In the distance, smoke curled into the sky. Gunfire echoed once, then silence. He didn't look back. He ran. Mud caked his boots, branches whipped his face, but he ran until his lungs tore at his ribs. He kept hearing Kessler's voice. "You burn it if they catch me." The drive in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He reached an old ranger station and collapsed inside, chest heaving, hands shaking. He hadn't saved anyone. He'd just survived. And now he had a choice: stay quiet and live, or speak and die. But he knew what silence had cost him before. He pulled out the tape, stared at the label. Session 14, DH. He didn't know what DH stood for, but it didn't feel like initials. It felt like a threat. Night fell hard. Inside the ranger station, he built a fire and loaded the tape into an old player rigged with a generator. The screen flickered to life. No preamble. A plain room. Metal chair. Concrete walls. A man in a suit, face blurred, walked in and sat. He said nothing. Just stared forward. A minute passed. Then, a girl entered. Blonde. Maybe 9. Holding a stuffed bear. The suited man reached out. The screen cut to black. He stared at it, breath shallow, chest tight. "Why cut it there?" he muttered. Then it hit him. Someone had edited this. Not to hide the crime, but to direct the story. These weren't just records. They were scripts. Marek had selected what he saw. What else was missing? How much truth was buried between the frames? The tape kept spinning. White noise now. But it wasn't empty. It was waiting. He couldn't sleep. The fire cracked and hissed behind him, but the cold came from inside now. He replayed the footage in his head, dissecting every second. The way the suited man sat. The girl's toy. The absence of sound. It wasn't just evidence, it was direction. Controlled, curated, manipulated. He pulled the tape from the player and flipped it over. Hidden beneath the label, barely visible in the flicker of firelight, was a faint stamp. Covalt Media, Asset 14 2D. Covalt. The name sent shivers through him. A defunct media shell company tied to military psychological operations. On paper, it collapsed in 2001. But some ghosts don't die. They evolve. If Covalt was involved, this wasn't just blackmail. It was influence. Messaging. Maybe even grooming. These weren't tapes made to expose. They were made to train. To desensitize. To test thresholds. He stared into the fire. This wasn't about catching monsters. This was about learning how they're made. He left before sunrise. The air outside had that haunted quiet, like the world knew what he carried. He needed to find the one person who had ever gone public about Covalt. Armand Silas, a whistleblower turned ghost. Officially dead. Unofficially vanished. But whispers said he resurfaced under a new name, running a bookshop in a nowhere town. He drove through dying trees and pale dawn mist, silence thick inside the car. The drive was long, the kind that empties you. At the edge of a crumbling town, he found the shop, Third Archive. Dusty glass. Faded awning. Bell above the door barely clinging on. Inside, a man in his 60s, black, wiry frame, with eyes that carried too much. The protagonist said nothing. Just placed the tape on the counter. Silas stared at it for a long time. "They still surface," he finally said. "They always do." Then, "Why'd you come here?" The reply was quiet. "To ask what this really is." Inside the shop, books towered like tombstones. Silas sat behind the counter, hands folded, posture stiff. "You think you've seen something," he said. "But you haven't." He tapped the tape. "That's not raw footage. It's staged, built from truth, bent into obedience." The protagonist frowned. "But it's real, right?" Silas nodded. Yes, and no. The crimes happened, but what you're watching is their retelling, curated by Covalt for internal behavioral analysis. He paused. To see who could be conditioned, who'd stay silent. The blood drained from his face. So Merrick? Merrick was part of it, Silas said. We all were. He slid a photo forward. Merrick, younger, in a control room. Behind him, Wexler. And behind Wexler, the protagonist's sister. Smiling. Alive. Wand. The floor dropped out of him. She wasn't missing, Silas whispered. She was taken, and they gave her back. The silence inside him broke like glass. He stared at the photo until it blurred. His sister's face, years younger, smiling beside monsters. Not fear. Not struggle. Just presence. Acceptance. She was returned to your family under supervision, Silas said. Conditioned, groomed. She forgot what she saw, forgot what she was. He remembered the years after. Her detachment. Her silence. Her rage. The missing pieces. She didn't run away, he said. They put her back. Silas nodded. They needed to study the long-term effects, what reintegration looked like. He felt sick. She died 3 years ago, he whispered. Car crash. Silas didn't flinch. Then she died believing the lie worked. The protagonist stood dizzy. His voice cracked. Who else was given back? Silas stared at him. How deep do you want to go? He didn't answer. He just picked up the tape. And for the first time it felt like a coffin. Outside, the town felt unreal, too quiet, too still. He sat on a bench across from the shop, unable to move. The weight of what he learned pressed down like gravity. His sister hadn't vanished. She'd been swallowed and spit out. Her trauma wasn't an accident. It was the result of precision, design. And he'd missed it. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. The sky above was pale and wide, uncaring. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat, letting the truth calcify inside him. Merrick hadn't been delivering justice. He'd been passing the torch. The system didn't die. It just got better at hiding. The tape was still in his bag. The drive too. He could disappear now. Let it all go. Or he could light the match. But either way, this wasn't just a story anymore. It was a legacy. And he was already part of it. He drove back to the city like a man carrying his own funeral. Every mile peeled something away. He wasn't a journalist anymore. He wasn't even a witness. He was a threat. He'd crossed the threshold of knowing, and now the system would respond. His plan was simple. Upload the footage, the drive, everything. Burn every safety net. Force the world to look. But it wasn't courage driving him. It was rage. Controlled. Wow. Focused. Focused. He stopped only once, at a payphone. He called the one person who might still care. A voice answered, tired, cautious. It was his ex-editor. I've got something, he said. Something real. The voice replied, you always do. He didn't argue. I need your server. No questions. 1 hour. The pause said enough. You'll never work again. He smiled bitterly. Wasn't planning to. He hung up and looked at his reflection in the booth glass. There was no part of him left that hadn't already been set on fire. He entered the building through the back, forgotten hallways of a dying newspaper office. Empty desks. Burnt-out monitors. Ghosts of stories that never made it. The editor sat in a dark server room, lit only by screens. Older man, gruff, worn by decades of compromise. No questions were asked. The tape was digitized. The files were unlocked. Silas' photo. Merrick's name. Wexler's face. Everything lined up like gravestones. If we publish this, we get buried with it, the editor said. We don't publish it, the protagonist replied. We leak it. He tapped the keyboard, uploading files to dead links, anonymous mirrors, cold servers. This isn't about fame, it's about weight. The editor shook his head. You always loved lost causes. He didn't deny it. He watched the progress bar climb like a final heartbeat. There was no coming back. Only through. The upload reached 100% watch. Then, everything went wrong. First, the lights flickered. Then the monitors went black. A hum of static rolled through the air like a storm warning. Backup generator, he asked. The editor checked. Nothing. No signal. No feed. Then came the sound, boots. Heavy. Sound. Methodical. Echoing down the corridor like war drums. They're here, the editor whispered. You tripped something. He grabbed the drive and handed it to him. Run. But the protagonist didn't move. He stared at the shadows forming in the doorway. Figures in black, faces masked, rifles raised. Don't shoot, he said. It's already out. One figure stepped forward. Voice distorted. No, it's not. Then, a shot rang out. The editor dropped. The world narrowed. He turned and bolted, clutching the drive like a lung. Sirens in his skull. Rage in his bones. And you all. They weren't stopping the leak. They were erasing the witnesses. He ran through fire exits, leapt over stairwells, ducked behind old vending machines. Gunshots echoed behind him, but he didn't look back. Every corner could end him. Every hallway could be the last thing he ever saw. He burst through a basement exit into the alley. Rain pelted his face like broken glass. A black van roared around the corner. He slid across the hood of a parked car, dove through a fence, scraped his shoulder open. Adrenaline screamed through him. Somewhere in the madness he realized, they hadn't come to stop him from leaking the truth. They came to retrieve the original. The raw source. The drive. Merrick's final confession. And he still had it. Blood ran down his arm. His breath came in gasps. But he kept moving. Because behind every bullet was a message you were never supposed to know. And behind every step was his answer. I do now. He reached a parking garage and collapsed behind a dumpster, chest burning, vision fractured. Rain still fell, steady and cold. He pulled out the drive. It blinked. Still alive. Still holding everything. But so was he. And that meant it wasn't over. Somewhere, Kessler was likely dead. Merrick, gone. Silas, vanished again. The editor's blood was still warm on his hands. And yet the world outside continued. Sirens. Traffic. Laughter from some nearby window. Normalcy. Indifferent and blind. He pulled out a burner phone, dialed a contact. One ringed. Time to dial. Two. Then, is it done? The voice asked. Almost, he said. I've got one more stop. You won't survive this, the voice warned. I know, he replied. He hung up, wiped the drive on his shirt, then stood, silhouetted by the garage's flickering light. This wasn't about survival. It was about finishing what they tried to bury. He arrived at the only place that made sense, the newsroom's archive vault, long sealed, long forgotten. The old security badge still worked. Dust hung in the air like ash. Rows of dead monitors. Filing cabinets no one had opened in years. It was a graveyard of forgotten truths. He sat at an analog console, wiped it clean with his sleeve. The drive fit perfectly. No internet. No trace. Just one final upload, to a buried server few remembered. It wouldn't reach headlines. But the right people would find it. Whistleblowers. Leakers. The quiet revolution. The kind that bleeds slow. He whispered to the room, you wanted ghosts. I'll give you one. Then pressed transfer. The console blinked. Data moved. Footage filled the void. Victims, predators, names, dates. A time capsule of every rotten thing. He leaned back, eyes burning. "This is all I have left," he said. "You don't get to silence me." The files transferred in waves, each percent a heartbeat. Somewhere above him, thunder rolled. Not the weather. Helicopters. He could hear the low pulse of rotors, distant but closing. He had maybe 2 minutes. He copied the data to a final disk, labeled it by hand. Linux. It wasn't for publication. It was for memory. Proof that she lived in more than silence. Then he did what he'd promised Merrick, what Kessler had died for. He removed the original tape from his bag, held it once more. The weight of it. The history. The poison. And he burned it. The flames took quickly, dancing in the shadows. Black smoke filled the vault. The smell was chemical and ancient. He didn't cry. He just watched it all disappear, tape curling like skin. "You don't get to keep her," he whispered. "You don't get to keep any of them." Then he walked out to meet what was coming. They were waiting outside, 4 black SUVs, masked men, rifles drawn. But he walked out slow. Calm. No sudden moves. He carried nothing but the disc. A man stepped forward, tall, commanding. "Where is it?" he asked. The protagonist smiled, tired. "Gone. Like your conscience." The man raised his weapon. "You've made a mistake." "No," he said. "You made the mistake. You recorded it." A second passed. Then, a third. No gunfire. Just a nod. The men closed in, zip ties pulled tight. His wrists bled. Knees hit pavement. They dragged him toward a van. But it didn't matter. He looked at the sky. It was clean. Blue. Empty. Somewhere, in a dozen dark corners, the files were already spreading. He wasn't a martyr. He wasn't even the message. He was just the match. The fire would come from others. And it wouldn't stop this time. They locked him in a room with no windows. Just concrete and silence. Hours passed. Maybe days. No food. No sound. Just him and the truth. And that was louder than any torture. He whispered names to the walls. His sister. Merrick. Kessler. Silas. The editor. All gone. All still here. He carved a line into the wall each time he remembered something they tried to erase. Dozens by morning. By morning. Hundreds by night. The door opened once. A man stepped in, face in shadow. "No one saw your leak," he said. "It's over." The protagonist smiled, lips cracked. "Not yet. You'll die here," the man said. "So did your systems," he replied. The man left. Silence returned. But he kept carving. Not to remember. But to stay human. Because what they feared most wasn't exposure. It was endurance. Weeks later, somewhere across the world, a student found it. A link buried on a defunct military blog. Clicked it. Saw a name. Then a face. Then 100. Then thousands. It didn't go viral. It went quiet. Quiet like a breath held too long. But people shared it. On encrypted threads. On burner networks. Behind locked doors. A slow fuse. And one night, a screen lit up in a senator's office. Then another in a journalist's inbox. Then another on a mother's desktop. Eyes opened. Not all at once. But enough. The system didn't collapse. But it flinched. And that was the beginning. No one ever found him. Not in records. Not in graves. He became what they feared. A whisper, a scar, a reminder. The truth didn't roar. It whispered. But it never shut up again. The building was gone now. demolished under the name of urban renewal. The archive room, the server racks, the vault, all of it erased. In its place, a parking structure stood, concrete, sterile, hollow, wad, kind of place built to forget. But memory doesn't vanish with the wrecking ball. Not when it's digital. Not when it's shared in silence. One night, a woman stood near the edge of the top level, staring out at the skyline. Early 30s. Latina. U. Journalist. In her pocket, a drive, marked with a single word, echo, left anonymously. Inside, footage, documents, confessions. She hadn't published yet. She hadn't decided, but she had it. And that meant the thread was still uncut. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. She whispered, "You were real." Not to mourn, but to affirm. This story had no ending. Only echoes. And somewhere, someone else was listening. She returned to her small apartment just before midnight. A cluttered desk. Stacks of notes. A single coffee mug that hadn't been washed in days. She plugged the drive into an isolated laptop. No network. Just local eyes. The screen flickered. A folder opened. Titled, Protocol Eden. She opened the first file. It was the same video. The girl with the bear. The man in the suit. Then, static. Then, another file. Then another. Endless. Each one worse. Each one more deliberate. The pattern emerged slowly. Intentional pacing. Repetitive themes. Reinforcement. It wasn't just blackmail. It was programming. Pavlov with power. She leaned back in her chair, hands shaking. "Who made this?" she whispered. Then another question followed it, colder. "Who watched it?" A final file blinked at the bottom. Title, Asset 0. She hesitated. Then, clicked. The screen went black. The screen returned. A grainy video. A dark room. A child crying, off screen. Then a face emerged into frame. Not a predator. A boy. 10. Pale, toss. Eyes wide, locked on camera. His voice barely audible. "They said I could go home if I smiled." He didn't smile. Behind him, a shadow moved. Tall. Familiar. The camera shifted slightly, and the protagonist entered the frame, years younger. Confused. New. Numb. Bite. He was a test subject too. A victim before he became a witness. The video ended abruptly. Silence again. The woman clutched her chest. Everything reconfigured. He hadn't just found the truth. He was part of it. Groomed. Dimmy. Released. Left to chase ghosts he didn't know were his. She closed the laptop. Sat in the dark. He was never looking for justice, she whispered. He was looking for himself. But now, she had to decide what she'd become. The next morning the woman walked through downtown like a ghost in her own life. People moved past her, oblivious. She held the drive in her coat pocket, thumb brushing the edge with every step. She had written stories before, big ones. But none like this. This one wasn't for clicks. It was for reckoning. She stopped at a street corner, looked up at the courthouse, morning sun bouncing off its cold facade. Inside those walls, men in suits were already building lies, preparing statements, tying their ties. She could walk in. She could tell everything. Or she could wait. Feed it slowly. Leak by leak. Pain by pain. She pulled out her phone. Drafted a message. "I have something. You need to see it." Then paused. Just like he had. She didn't hit send. Not yet. But the words had already left her. The cycle had begun again. Somewhere, unknown city, unknown room, a man sat alone, watching a wall of screens. Static, security feeds, blurred faces. He wore no uniform, no name tag, just a thin smile. The drive had failed to stop them, but it had made them pivot, adapt. They'd learned something. That even truth, if shaped carefully, could be used again. "We'll reframe it," he said to no one. "Make it fiction, sell it as horror. Let them consume it until they forget." On one screen, the woman appeared, standing near the courthouse. On another, the boy from the tape, now older, still watching. "Fear doesn't kill systems," he said. "It feeds them." He leaned back in the chair. "Let it spread." Then paused. Just before the lights dimmed, he muttered one final line, barely audible over the static. This was never about hiding. It was about letting them see just enough to stop looking.